maybe I'll play some piano for you. Something like that.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of I Know This Guy, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of some of the most interesting people I know. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to I Know This Guy wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, my kids want me to say something about ringing a bell. What the hell's a bell? Hey everybody, it's Norm Farrar, host of I Know This Guy. And today we have jazz musician extraordinaire, James Hill. James has his own solo projects and part of one of the hottest bands out there, Bad Not Good, a hip-hop jazz crossover band. And they're filling stadiums everywhere. I can't wait to get started. I hope I said that right. Jazz, hip-hop, crossover band. Like, tell us a little bit more about it, because a lot of people, I've listened to the band and they are incredible, but a lot of people haven't even heard of that type of genre.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the band started about 8 years ago, and I wasn't a part of it back then. I just joined about 3.5 years ago, but it's primarily a jazz band, and I guess the reviewers end up looping it. I mean, the band did some collaborations with Ghostface Killa, and also one of their breakthroughs is kind of a collaboration with Tyler the Creator on YouTube. They were covering an Odd Future song, which is kind of how they got recognition about 8 or 9 years ago at this point. So that's where the hip hop connotation comes from. But currently, we've been touring a lot over the past 3 years, and we mostly just play, like, we do some collaborations with rappers and stuff at live shows if we happen to know someone who's at the same festival or something. But for the most part, we just kind of play like psychedelic jazz, kind of rock, kind of a lot of experimental music on stage. So for the most part, it's primarily a jazz thing. I know that's a kind of a vague term, so a lot of people don't really understand, and including myself, what jazz even really entails. But essentially, what it entails to me is just uh, an openness during the performance, and we just kind of, whatever comes to our mind, we just let it flow, and we improvise a lot, and we have, loose forms and melodies that we can adhere to, if we feel like we're lost or out of ideas. But yeah, for the most part, I would label it jazz.
A lot of times I talk to entrepreneurs and they talk about the power of networking. And in this case, it really is the power of collaboration, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, networking as well is always a really important part of it. Um, in fact, I went to Humber College in Toronto, and probably, I would say, yeah, 99% of the people I know today are somehow connected via the network to those connections that I made while I was at school. So when I moved to Toronto, I met the professors and the other students, and then it just kind of slowly branched out like that. And if I could think of anyone that I know right now who's a musician, I could somehow trace it back to Humber for sure, which is
Hmm.
which is pretty. Yeah, I know maybe that seems incredible, but like I don't. It's I think I could do it. Maybe at the end of, if we have some extra time to kill, you can drop some names, and I'll trace them back by degrees of separation or something like that. But yeah, collaborations are really important. I have a new project coming out under the pseudonym Project Whatever, which is my Instagram handle as well. Kind of facetious name that I like. It's kind of I chose it because I like to do a lot of like art projects, visual art projects, a lot of different genres of music. So with that name, I can kind of do whatever the heck I want and get away with it without too much criticism. But I'm releasing some music for the first time under that name, and I'm releasing some features with singers and some collaborations with other instrumentalists and stuff. And it's just such a common thing now, and especially with coronavirus pandemic, it's really easy to just kind of reach out to your musician friends and send them some recordings, and then ask if they can record something on top, and then make collaborations that way.
I got a notice just to go onto a Zoom room, just like we're doing right now. And it was just a band just getting together, four guys. and they just broadcast. They, just wanted to get their music out to an audience that they haven't been able to do in the last, 8 weeks or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, it must be really hitting the music industry really hard. And also, like a lot of musicians, like they just love to be on stage, and not being out there and just having to go through this type of medium. Like, how's that affecting you?
Me less so than some people I know for sure. I mean, I kind of thrive in that hermit lifestyle, to tell you the truth.
Hmm.
Like I have some friends who are just all about playing. Like they play so much, and when they don't have an opportunity to play, they feel lost, and I just find them, walking around in the sketchy parts of town, like blinded, and they're like, "What do I do?" That kind of. I'm joking, but yeah, I think me, like I'm used to this lifestyle, just kind of staying at home writing music. I do miss it though. I really miss seeing my friends primarily, who are also my colleagues, most of them. I miss playing with them. I miss playing live shows. I miss that rush of being in front of a crowd. um yeah, I definitely miss it, and it's a struggle, and I haven't actually put out any live performances via Zoom or Instagram television, Instagram TV, or whatever. I haven't put anything out yet, but I've been putting some stuff together, and I've been recording a lot of music in this time, and a lot of it's coming out in the next couple weeks actually.
I noticed that you said something about hermit.
Hermit the
Do
Frog.
you get do you get do you get stage fright at all? Or you
Oh
just
yeah.
go out there and it's just second nature?
No, it's definitely not second nature. um Yeah, I do have stage fright, and it just kind of shows me that I care about it, because I've definitely played gigs that, it's either it's at a venue that I don't like, or had a bad interaction with the owner of the venue, or something, or like the situation is just like a little unsavory, and I'm not looking forward to it, and I don't really, or I don't know. It's hard to explain the type of situation without coming across as like a jerk who doesn't care about his trade. But there's definitely been situations, very seldom, but that I've been in, where I just don't care about how the music comes across, and in times like that, I get no stage fright. I just walk out, and I end up playing a great show, and then I'm happy as a result of it. And it's like, if only I could trick myself into believing I didn't care any of the time while playing a show, then I think I wouldn't have stage fright. But I think I do have stage fright because I just care a lot about what I do, and I want it to come across, and I want everyone to have a good time, including myself.
Like for years, I struggled with just speaking on a microphone in front of people.
Right.
That's one thing I've kind of always admired about you, James. I feel like your mic banter, at least as long as I can remember, has always been it's always held interest. It's very tangential, I guess. That's how I describe it. I think like to get around that for me, it's almost like yeah, tricking your mind into thinking that's like a fun situation. Like you're just going out, there's no pressure to like be something you're not, and if you're being honest with the audience and with yourself on stage, then I think it opens up that communication a bit more,
Right.
or that flow of energy, at least for me personally. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, like
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate you commending me like that. Everyone who's listening, you should come to a show. I might say something crazy.
yeah. Look
Um,
out.
look out. I do tend to say things. Yeah, I think I'm driven by the energy of the performance, that like it just leads me into this tangential spiral into like crazy land. Um, shouldn't use the word crazy so much because it's not as PC as it used to be. It's funny. I was listening to new classical FM right before. Like I turn it on every morning. I just turn on my stereo, and new classical FM is on, and it's always the same commercial. It's like great music for a crazy world. Like every time I hear, it, I'm like, yeah, clearly I don't know. Maybe they're not informed, but whatever. I'm not really all about political correctness or anything. I just found that funny. But anyways, yeah, I find that when I'm in front of a crowd, I end up getting driven to just say absurd things, and I don't know what it is that compels me, but I think it's just the adrenaline of being in front of people. And it's also reassuring that, like, assuming your show is well attended, which mine are always sold out, so it's not a problem. I'm just joking. I think that happened once. I had on my bucket list to sell at a show, and I did that with local talent for the first time, like a couple months ago. I think it was in February of this year. Yeah, February of this year. Wow, it feels like years ago. But yeah, February of this year was the first time, so I crossed that off. So I have no real drive to do better, in the coming months. But anyways, so yeah, I find that if the shows are well attended, then there's bound to be a lot of people that are into what you're saying and into what you're doing. Like there's still always going to be people that aren't into it, and who are like, if you accidentally make eye contact with them, they're like, what the F, man? They're just like, what the hell are
Mhm.
you talking about? Like,
Right.
not into what you're saying. And that could be really discouraging. But then if you just look to the right of them, like their girlfriend or their boyfriend or whatever, if it's the case of Dylan's shop, maybe they brought like their dog along. The dog's like, like, I'm into this, man. And it's like reassuring or something. I don't know. There's always someone that you can look at who it bounce your energy off. So I find, unless you're like really bombing the show and like nobody's having a good time, which is never the case. And I've seen you play a lot too, Hayden, and like I've never seen, out of any of my friends I've seen play, I've never seen anyone bomb a show. Like I feel
Mhm.
like that happens in like stand-up comedy, is because it's more transparent. It's easier to bomb because it's just you and a mic, right? But at
Yeah.
least when you're playing with a group, when you're playing with a group of musicians, like you can pass the baton to someone else and just take a breather for a sec, and like if you feel like you're bombing. But when it comes to talking on the mic, it's like, yeah, you just look at someone who's into it and then you just kind of talk to them or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's like a feedback thing, right? Or feedback loop where like
Yeah, positive
if you
feedback,
yeah, yeah.
virtuous loop.
And yeah, and like you said, it's kind of easy if you do kind of focus on the negative there, then you're going to get a negative feedback. But if you can try and just focus on the things that are connecting with people, or like if you get one laugh or anything along those lines, like then it's just going to spiral you upwards.
Right. Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. And then that oxytocin or whatever it is, serotonin,
Yeah.
oxycontin starts kicking in, and then then you have a
That's
good
cool
time.
jazz. That's cool
Yeah,
jazz.
Oh, that's cool jazz. Yeah, the LSD starts to kick in. You're
yeah.
like, what am I talking about? I've been talking for 30 minutes. We should play the first song. That actually happens sometimes. Like I just go on such tangents, and then like, wow, we should really play. Like I was afraid for the last few so I should mention, because no one probably knows who the hell I am. I should mention that, yeah, I have this project called Local Talent as well, and I have a few co-led and self-led projects. One of my self-led ones is Local Talent's my most recent one. It's Rich Brown on bass, Ian Wright on drums. We're all Toronto musicians. It's like a jazz experimental band. We released our debut album in December of 2019. We're playing shows and stuff as in the wake of the release, and yeah, we only have 7 songs, and the album in its entirety is in its duration is 30 something minutes, 34 minutes. So when it comes to a show, like a two set show, like at the Rex or at any place where we play, we often play two shows, two sets. That's like an hour at least of music. And it's hard to, fill like we played 2-hour shows before. And somehow with 7 songs, like it just fills up the time. And that's because I get into these crazy tangents, like talking on the mic, and I do it like out of nervous energy, because I'm like, if I don't talk a hell of a lot in the next like 30 minutes, we're going to run out of material, and then we're going to get booed off stage. My greatest fear is to be embarrassed publicly, so I always overcome it by chatting.
It was around March last year. You mentioned that you were working towards releasing this album, or like it was in the works then. Were you kind of were getting the grant together and everything for that?
Last
Um,
March, yeah.
I know you mentioned like non-musical influences, um, and I was just wondering if you could talk about that for, especially for like a non-music audience. I think sometimes the idea of incorporating, uh, you know, like ideas or like the structure of a movie and like putting that on music might seem kind of foreign.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk about your process with that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Like process for that project specifically was kind of like, I was in this zone at that time with I was watching a lot of like Miyazaki movies, and I was always imagining those kind of like that kind of Japanese animation style in my head while I was writing the stuff. And the composer for those movies is Joe Saishi, and he's actually supposed to play a concert with the TSO or the national orchestra. I can't remember. I think it was with the TSO. He was supposed to play a concert at Roy Thompson Hall, anyways, and
Hmm.
then COVID struck, and I
No.
was like, that's a pro for me because I couldn't afford tickets. I was like, well, now no one can go see it.
Yeah.
Um,
So there.
yeah, it's like $250 for tickets. I was like, come on, I'm just trying to live a childhood fantasy here. Um, anyways, yeah, I often like visualize that kind of stuff when writing, and I wanted that album to sound like a score for a movie like Princess Mononoke or Castle in the Sky or Howl's Moving Castle. I wanted it to kind of feel like a score for a movie like that, kind of have that emotional undulation from the
Hmm.
beginning to the end, which I think it did. So I was just kind of in the zone at that time. It's not always my process, but at that time it certainly was. I kind of have a bit of that now too, but my processes are changing as I use new, devices like I've been using Ableton so much since being isolated at home. Ableton is a digital audio workstation. It's like GarageBand on steroids. For those of you who have Macs, you know what GarageBand is. Probably it's just like a music recording um, software, and it's got capabilities so that you can record live instruments into it. But there's also digital instruments embedded in the software, and you can control them with a MIDI controller, as they call them. I have one here. I have it plugged in. I'm actually recording to it right now. That's not a real piano, even though it sounds like you know sound like Barenboim at some symphony hall or something, but it's probably because it's a piano that was recorded there, and then put into like this hard drive. Basically, I'll try to simplify it, and then you can upload it onto your computer, and then trigger the recordings of every single note of the piano using a digital keyboard that's linked up to your computer. So you can record that way, and it doesn't just apply for piano; it applies to drums, to oboes, to strings, to everything. So I've been using that platform a lot to record music, and the process is still kind of new to me. I mean, I've been doing it for over a year, but it's like, no, it's not new. I shouldn't say it's new. I feel like, yeah, I've got a really good workflow on that digital audio workstation, but the process is so different than just sitting down at acoustic piano, whereas you have clear parameters like 88 keys, lowest key, highest key, and that's it, and then you got to get creative with it. Whereas with Ableton, it's like, oh, I could be a cellist today, I could be a drummer today, I could be a rapper today, I could be a whatever today, I could be a finger cymbal specialist, you know? And
Cowbell.
yeah, with all those opportunities are at your fingertips, it's like I get so excited. I'm like, and especially drinking a couple pots of tea a day, it's like those two things in conjunction, like just lead me to like constantly go down these crazy like paths like of workflow where I end up just really frantically putting pieces of the puzzle together to make songs, and I just lose sight of like any sort of visualization of those kind of cartoons that I had during the writing of that album.
What was it like for you to go from smaller gigs into stepping into the band Bad Bad Not Good, and now you've got some massive audiences that you were playing to?
Uh, that's a good question. So like, it's funny stories. I have so many funny stories about playing with Bad Bad. We've traveled in over 35 countries, like multiple times. We've like revisited, returned to multiple countries many times, especially like England and other European. England might not be a European country for much longer, but we've traveled to Asia a few times, South America quite a few times, and like, yeah, just the experience of doing that and playing for huge audiences. Like our biggest audience was probably 25,000 people when we opened for the Red Hot Chili Peppers in Barcelona, and going to that from like playing jazz gigs in Toronto for like 5 people,
At the
like
Rex.
yeah, or like
Yeah.
at the Transac or something. Um, like there's more people in the band than there are in the audience. It's it was a trip at first. It was definitely a trip, but I adjusted really quickly. I adjusted really quickly. There's a certain impersonality that comes with larger audiences. It's like way more nerve wracking now for me to play in front of 5 people than it is to play in front of 500 people or 5,000 people. And the bigger the audience get, the less personal it becomes. It's like, man, there's going to be at least 1,000 people here tonight that have a great time. So it's like that's kind of reassuring, kind of like what we were saying before with like mic banter. Um, so the funny story about that is that the first show we played together was I think 2016 or 17. I can't remember which one, but we played at the Ace Hotel in LA, and it was like this really cool event. Like Bilal was there, um, um, Napalm was there from Hiatus Coyote. Who else was there? Like Miguel Atwood Ferguson was there. Like Kamasi Washington was there. There's like a crazy lineup of just really talented people. Um, and we were playing, and it was my first show with them ever, and it was like in a really intimate theater, kind of bridged the gap between big audience and really intimate small spaces. I was like really nervous. I was like, this is the first show like this I've ever played. um and then we played it, and it was cool. It went pretty well, all things considered. I just tried to get the songs right and play some interesting solos and stuff. But then right after that, they're like, okay, we got this crazy opportunity to go open for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. My second gig with the band was flying to Barcelona to open for the Chili Peppers in a stadium, like a stadium show. It was insane. And we got there, and like, it was just like really hot. I'm like, oh man, like I was just in LA like a couple days ago, and like flew back to Toronto and went immediately to Barcelona for overnight. Like we were there for one night and flew back. And we get there, and then the our musical hospitality guy like picked us up at the airport in his like tiny Spanish car, and we all crammed in there with like all our instruments, and like it was like really hot, and he's driving like super fast, and I was like, oh man, we're gonna go play a stadium gig that same day. The same day we landed, we played the show. So we went straight to the stadium. There was like 500 people on staff there, just like setting up like with scaffolds and like cherry pickers and stuff, setting up lights, and we did our sound check, and then like the show came, and I just really wasn't nervous. Really, like I was nervous, but I wasn't as nervous as I thought I would be. And I think it was just by virtue of the size of the crowd. It was like impossible to fathom who is there because there's so many people there. It's like, oh man, my mom is watching. Oh my, my whatever. Like it's these people that might make you nervous because they're. I mean, my mom doesn't make me nervous when she sees me play, but it's a bad example. But there's like, be like, oh, Herbie Hancock's in the crowd or whatever. Like he's watching my show, and Herbie Hancock has seen me play. We play this same festivals, and that's nerve wracking when there's like these people you look up to who do what you do to a really high level. It's kind of nerve wracking, but like I knew there would be amazing musicians there, but I also knew there was like thousands and thousands and thousands of other people who I just didn't know, and so that kind of takes the edge off. It's interesting. And then after that Barcelona show, we ended up playing like hundreds of more shows, and it just kind of got easier and easier as we went on.
So, who was your biggest influence in jazz, or who is?
So I think like in terms of the notes that they play, like and the musical style, as opposed to like who influenced me to go into music, because the person who influenced me to go into music uh, was my high school music teacher, Greg Runions. So he was probably the biggest influence, all things considered. And he was also a great piano player and vibraphonist and drummer. But in terms of like people I really look up to as style, like their styles as musicians, I would say as a pianist specifically, Lennie Tristano. Like I just love his. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's kind of a little niche. Have you heard of him, Norm? I know Hayden has because
Oh yeah.
No, I
we're in
haven't.
a group together that played all Lenny Tristano music, Hayden and I.
What a phase.
Yeah, it's that phase hasn't died, man. Like I still listen to Lenny Tristano and Warren Marsh, Lee Konitz, Connie Crothers, all the people from that school. And anyways, yeah, so he is probably my biggest influence as a pianist because he's so free with his, and he was around the time of Charlie Parker and Bud Powell and Billie Holiday. And the thing that's most interesting about him for me, and it's Lennie Lennie if you're looking him up right now, trying to get on that inspo. yeah, he's really interesting to me because he didn't really adhere to the norms, the jazz norms of the day, which were kind of basically just sound as much like Charlie Parker as possible. Was like what everyone was doing like back in the 40s and 50s. And he didn't sound like Charlie Parker. Like he definitely was very influenced by Charlie Parker and Bud Powell and Billie Holiday, but he had his own style and he was blind. Like he's one of the like 50 famous blind pianists, and there's so many blind pianists.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and he just invented this whole style. It's not super popular now. Like not a lot of people when you say who do you know who are famous jazz musicians, like no one really knows who Lennie Tristano is unless you are a jazz musician. But he invented this style that's just so interesting, and he had a school out of his apartment in Manhattan. And yeah, he's such an interesting guy, and I love his style and his approach, and I really relate to it. So I would say he's my biggest influence as a pianist.
I got to check
Right.
it out. So Hayden, you're gonna have to pull some of his music for me.
I got all the good
Yeah,
stuff.
just
All
download the
right.
just download the workbook after this podcast, and I'll list the
Yeah.
influences and source material, and barbers, the who sharpens Norm's beard scissors, all these
Yeah,
things. What kind of
absolutely.
barbecue sent him all ablaze? It's we're kind of entering a new era. Like a lot of jazz musicians who are very famous are like reaching the end of their lives. They're like super old, and it's kind of sad. And but like yeah, it's like for instance someone like Barry Harris or something, a very famous pianist, and he's such an influence even to like really young jazz musicians today. And it's like just to have someone around who knows people from back in the day who kind of invented the music that they're into, assuming they're into jazz, is like an asset, beyond measure. So it's kind of like a new era we're entering. There's not going to be many people who knew all those cats from the back in the day, left. um so I don't know how like institutions and stuff are going to move forward with the canon of jazz. It's going to have to take a leap forward, I think, because it's going to be harder to be so enthusiastic about things that happened so long ago where there's nobody left to kind of tell the story. It's not going to
Right.
be that interesting for younger musicians.
Yeah, I wonder if it'll go the way of like classical music, where you kind of there's like a lineage of like teachers, or you can trace back certain teachers to having studied with so many generations back. Like I'm not exactly sure how it works, but
Yeah.
apparently you can trace back certain teachers to like say Beethoven or someone like,
Oh
and
wow.
kind of know who's been in contact with them all the way down throughout history.
Like Nadia Boulanger is a good example because she's like studied with like Gershwin and like
Mm.
Herbie Hancock and like Aaron Copland and just like tons of no, not Herbie Hancock. I don't know if Herbie Hancock studied with her. Anyways, I think maybe Keith Jarrett did. Anyways, so many people have studied with Nadia Boulanger, maybe Quincy Jones. I don't know. We should do a fact check on this later.
Yeah,
But
all of
I
this.
yeah, I know Nadia Boulanger is this French like teacher, basically like pedagogue, and she knows like everyone. And I'm not sure if she's still living. If she is, she's very old, but she's a legend. And like everyone goes to study like classical, not even just classical, but like music composition, form, music theory, all this stuff with her. And if you do that, like that credential looks amazing because it's like Nadia Boulanger, for Christ's sakes. Like she knows everyone. And since she knew everyone, you're right, like just by this theory that you're kind of talking about, like she probably knows people who knew people who knew people. And like just kind of that society passes on through the generations, that like close knit society of people who excel at what they do. And so, you know, maybe she like knew Gershwin, who knew someone, who knew someone, who knew someone, who was like,
Right.
Debussy's, you know, shoot, I don't know,
The
Taylor,
dog walker,
dog
Yeah.
who knew
walker.
the dog walker of.
Yeah, it's whatever it may be. Like, yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
I tried to play instruments. I was never very good. Although I did play the trumpet for a few years and I did like it. But
Nice.
so my buddy Terry Charles, he's a musician in Toronto. I bought a saxophone from him, and we decided that it'd be a great time to go up and visit my parents. They were in Maine, and I took it with me. So I went out on a stone, and it was a quiet afternoon, and I started playing, and I'm trying to play, and I know, like at that second, I knew I should just stop everything I ever have tried in music when I heard, "Shut up! Shut up! Shut the
Oh
F up!"
no, to
somebody,
you?
somebody was listening to me trying to play this tenor sax,
Oh wait, what
and
gig was that? That might have been me. No, I'm just
oh,
kidding.
was it?
No,
Yeah.
I just
Well,
I'd
anyways, I
never do that.
pissed off some family, and I just thought, oh, I'll pack it up, and that was it for my musical
No,
career.
seriously? It
Yeah,
really it
yeah, yeah.
discouraged you
You
to
know,
that point?
yeah. I mean, I wasn't very good, but then I passed on all my musical talent over to Hayden and the other guys, and they took it from there. So
But yeah, you got Hayden. Like now you can live vicariously through his music abilities. Like he's an
it's like the
amazing bass
armchair
player.
coach, right? So yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can never tell me to shut up now.
that's it.
How
That's
are
it.
you so sure that they were yelling at you? Was it maybe you're just so self-conscious that you assume that they
Oh
were
no, they were
yelling at you?
yelling at me. I could hear it. Like they were just yelling up the hill, like "Shut up! Shut up!"
Oh man.
Yeah,
I mean, the
and you
That's
can
first
so
hear
note of
rude.
you
saxophone
can
is
hear the
pretty
guy's
rough.
wife in the background. She was screaming as well.
Really?
Yeah, it was. It
Damn.
was. I guess it was really bad. Yeah,
Or the
but
drugs were really bad that day.
Triggered some weird trauma
Yeah.
in that family.
Yeah, or maybe they're
who
war
knows?
veterans or
Who
something,
knows?
and like someone instead of bugle, they had saxophone on the front lines. Who knows?
Yeah.
And they were playing
You
that
never
exact
know.
song and tone.
So I decided to grow a beard instead, and I'm good at that.
Oh, you're the best at that. There's no doubt
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
The keyboard. So was that your first choice? Is it your love?
My love's sitting in the other room.
Hi,
Well, your
Clara.
second love.
Yeah, she can't hear you. I mean, obviously,
What if
but
I
like,
scream louder?
I'll tell her after.
Okay.
If you scream louder, you turn up your output and scream louder. I'm not going to be able to go through the rest of this podcast. I feel like I already have hearing loss. Like I got tinnitus for sure. Like I feel it at night. Like, do you hear that ringing? It's like I think the refrigerator is ringing, and it's like sometimes it is the refrigerator, but it's also topped off with a little bit of, you know what I mean?
I got it.
You guys
I
both
do
got
have
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the military years ago, and in the artillery, and we
No
didn't
way.
use
Wow.
earplugs back then. It was just pow.
You didn't even put like grass in your ear or anything like
I
that?
can't remember. Like I was trying to figure out if we had like earplug. We didn't put grass in the ear, nor any type of deer
Beetle.
poop or anything like that. But I was trying to figure out like did we ever use those earplugs? And I can't remember. I don't think we did. But nowadays, like if I see anybody, with in the artillery, you'll see them with headphones.
I wonder if
Yeah,
wasn't Napoleon an artillery commander? I wonder if he wore bugs in his ears or whatever. I wonder if he had hearing loss.
who knows?
Definitely had noise canceling headphones.
Yeah.
I think so.
He had some biodynamic DT 770 80 ohms on at all times. That's really cool that you are we should talk about we should do a podcast on you. We should flip the switch at the end of this, and because
Well,
that's
you
really
know this
interesting.
guy then, and we
I had no idea. Yeah, I know this guy. I actually recommended you as the next guest for this podcast.
Oh, okay, very good.
Perfect.
Sent it to Hayden. But to revert back to your question about influences and piano and love, I think piano. I started piano when I was 6, and then quit like 6 months after because I hated it. I was always pretty like adept at it. I just because I love like tactile stuff. Like I was really into sculpting and visual arts and making stuff with my hands. I used to make jewelry too when I was younger, and so I was always like pretty decent at it, but I just never liked it because I didn't like the discipline of practicing, and I hated school at the time. I hated like schoolwork. I kind of have a bit of like ADHD or like OCD or something. Like I'll drop a bunch of medical terms, and maybe I have one of them. But yeah, I have trouble like focusing on schoolwork, especially work that people tell me to do. It's always been a struggle for me. So like piano, I'm surprised I didn't stick to it, but I think I just didn't stick to it because people were telling me what to do. So anyways, so I gave that up, and then it wasn't until late high school that I actually got into. I was really into like rock bands, like Led Zeppelin, and Dream Theater actually. And who else was like like a little less so Metallica, but I was also really into hip hop, which didn't really have an influence on my picking up an instrument again. But I remember I would always listen to like G Unit and Eminem and all, and Jay Z Black album when that was like all coming out. I was listening to those every single bus ride, which is an hour long because I grew up in the country. I would just listen to these albums on repeat until I got to school. Anyway, so I decided to think about getting a guitar. And I asked my parents one year for Christmas if they would buy me an acoustic guitar because I wanted to like play some Led Zeppelin tunes, primarily Stairway to Heaven,
Of course.
the last part of Stairway to Heaven. Anyway, so my parents they got me a guitar, acoustic Yamaha guitar, and a Yamaha Eterna. I think they bought it at Costco actually. Funny enough, it's a Costco guitar. I still have it. I actually lent it out to a friend. I was thinking about getting it back soon. Sentimental value. Um, anyways, and I got really into guitar, and I joined like a jam band at school. This would have been in uh, grade 10 or 11. Yeah, grade 10, second semester. And I got really into it, and I was super into Jimi Hendrix at the time as well. And I was like, oh man, I need to like I want to play electric guitar now. And like so, as most people do, they migrate to electric guitar. Bob Dylan, case in point. And then yeah, and then I started playing electric guitar in the jam band. And then I met this guy, John Kennelly, who also went to the same high school as me, which is Napanee District Secondary School. And he was so good. Like he was 10 times better than I was. And he just had like all his chops together. He was like transcribing solos. I couldn't even pronounce transcribe because I wasn't doing my English lessons correctly. And yeah, and he just kind of discouraged me. I was like, I need to maybe think about doing another instrument here where I can excel. But because I just felt like I could never catch up to this guy,
Mm.
and my pride was hurt. So it was kind of fortuitous that my high school music teacher asked me if I wanted to play piano, and he knew I had some experience when I was 6. I guess I told him. Although you didn't really need any experience to be in the jazz band at Napanee District Secondary School. There's not a lot of there weren't a lot of musicians there.
Yeah.
And the ones that we got beat up on the schoolyard. But yeah, there was an opening for the jazz piano slot, and there was this beautiful like Korg Oasis Korg Oasis keyboard in the music room, and it was like a big expenditure for the music program to buy this keyboard. I was like, that's mine. I'm gonna own that. I'm gonna like reign over that thing. And so I just like spent so much time practicing just to be in the jazz band. And yeah, I cultivated skills on the piano really quickly and kind of gave up guitar for a couple years, and I got really good at piano. And my high school music teacher gave me a mixtape of like Chick Corea, like Charlie Parker, Ella Fitzgerald, like a lot of the classics, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, a lot of the classic like jazz piano players like Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock and Bud Powell and all those guys, but then also just classic jazz recordings that I had never heard. I had never even heard any jazz until that point, which would have been like grade 11
Mm.
in high school. And I was kind of blown away that they were just kind of improvising that stuff on the spot, like on the fly. And I realized that was what I wanted to do because I thought it was super fun. It aligned exactly with the type of person I am, which is someone who likes to, you know, be tangential and just kind of feel free to do whatever. There's no restrictions in jazz. And I just fell in love with it. And the piano just kind of happened to be the instrument of choice at the time because of a series of events. And then I was like, I'm going to go to Toronto and study at Humber College. It's the only school I applied to. And then I got in, thankfully, and I went there. And then I honestly haven't even looked back since. But now I play tons of instruments. Like I play guitar pretty well. I play guitar like as much as I play piano now, especially nylon string guitar, Brazilian music I'm really into,
Mm.
and drums and stuff like that. But yeah, piano is like my main jam, stuff like that. But yeah, piano is like my main jam.
So James, we usually talk about a quote on the show. Oh, what's your quote, and why did you select it?
Um, that's a good question. Let me pull it up. I know I gave you a Schopenhauer quote
Yeah,
and a Zadie Smith quote. Yeah. I'm honestly, tell you the truth, I'm not really a quote guy. Like I do read a lot. Like my first biggest hobby is reading. Um, not that well. That's not considering that music is a hobby, because it's not a hobby. It's a lot more than that. But yeah, I read a lot. Like as much as I play music, and I love to read. I love to write. I love to like you know take writing classes and stuff like that. But I just for some like I don't remember quotes. I can paraphrase a lot of quotes and ideas from authors I like. But anyways, I so when you asked me to think of a quote, I did struggle a little bit because I don't really remember that many, but I did come up with some that I remember resonating with a lot when I read them. And one of which is resounding streets and towns robs life of all peace and pensiveness. And that's a quote by Schopenhauer. And I chose that because I don't know, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of talk about. I thought it'd be relevant to talk about, how all of us as musicians are kind of getting by during isolation, and like, are we able to stay focused on what we're doing, being at home? Like, unless you have a remote studio, which I don't. I'm in my bedroom literally right now, and I do a lot of my writing in here as well. It's like there's so many distractions. It's crazy. Like distractions from just literally everything. Other people in the building, like people calling me, like just you know everything. I don't want to get too specific, but like specifically to get specific, the traffic outside is like insanely annoying. And it's like I'm just trying to kind of get my workflow going, and there's all those distractions that come with home life, being at home, that kind of get in the way, and it's hard to make the division between just being at home, taking time off, and also still getting work done, during isolation. So I thought that quote was kind of fitting uh,
Hmm.
at this time.
I remember a movie. I think it was with Bill Murray, and he's same thing. He's trying to get away from the loud noises of the city so he can
Right.
focus. He's a writer, and he gets out to the country, and it's beautiful. And what ends up happening is he every day he's trying to write something, right? And he's got a bit of a writer's block. Now everything's quiet. He puts his it was typewriter back then. He's sitting there, he's just trying to think of something, and then he hears this beautiful chirping noise of this bird, and he's trying to figure what he's going to write. Keeps hearing this beautiful melody, and you could see it. He's just Well, after a couple of minutes, that bird starts to get on his voice, and all the sounds of the beautiful, the country that everybody would think at first glance is calming and soothing, ended up driving him absolutely crazy. And he related it back to to the city. Well, it's interesting because it's very hard to, isolate, to have to shut off everything so you can focus on something, because I always find that there's always that annoying something. Yesterday, we have a perfect sound studio, everything was quiet, friggin' lawnmower.
Yeah.
Or your emails, you start to do something and 20 emails come in. Well, what do? You check your emails. So trying to create that environment, either if you're a musician or if you're
Yeah.
just the average Joe, it's so bloody
Absolutely.
hard to do.
And to kind of expand along those lines, like yeah, Schopenhauer in this quote, he was talking specifically about whips, because back in his day there was horse-drawn carriages, and his biggest pet peeve was people whipping their horses, or like brandishing their whips in the air, just I don't know, out of some display of something. I don't know what if it's machoism
Whip,
or
it's called whip envy.
whip MD, yeah. And and he just goes on. I think it was called Noise or something, this essay, and he just goes on and on and on condemning whips. He's like, these people who are whipping should be whipped. Like he's talking like all this stuff, and you know how like caustic and intense. I don't know if you've ever, maybe you don't, but I don't know if you've ever read Schopenhauer. But he's like pretty like he's pretty intense with his criticism of things, and he's very straightforward and frank, and to a like comedic level. And it's funny to read how pissed off he is about these whips that are just going by outside. And it's like, for me, the whips are these like motorcyclists, and like I have nothing wrong, I have no problem with motorcyclists, and I myself have my motorcycle license and used to ride. I sold my bike about 2 years ago for studio time because I didn't have any money, and I recorded an album. But anyways, yeah, like I love the culture behind motorcycling. I love it, but like man, a lot of these Harleys, they're getting louder and louder, and they just like their engine decompressing or popping from like first to second and just like accelerating out of a light or whatever it is. It's like it almost feels like my glass is going to shatter, and I'm not even kidding. And I live like right on a major street in Toronto, and I was once in LA. I was at a Thai food restaurant, and a motorcyclist went by and he popped from like first to second gear, and the glass of the restaurant shattered. I kid you not. I was there with Bad Bad Not Good, and we were eating the spiciest food, and we were like sweating. We were already pretty anxious because like, am I going to survive this meal? And then all of a sudden it sounded like a gunshot, and we thought someone shot up the place, but it was a motorcycle like either backfiring or switching gears and like revving. I don't know what it was, but it popped so loud, and all the glass just shattered, and everyone was just like, holy shit, like what just happened? So it's like something that is that loud and distracting can just be so commonplace, or is just so commonplace in our societies and our cities. It's like, how would you expect anyone to get work done at home, unless you have like an sound isolation booth or whatever? And when it comes to like reading, for instance, a hobby I just said I like to do, it's like I used to go to the library and find peace and quiet there, but now there's no libraries open, there's no cafes, quiet cafes open, there's nothing. Like I'm in my house on a major street in Toronto, and there's like, you know people screaming, there's like, engines backfiring, there's like, I don't know. There's all these sorts of distractions, and it's just kind of hard to keep peace of mind.
Yeah. Can't wait for this COVID virus thing to settle down so we can get back to a little bit of normal life.
I feel like this time kind of presents itself as an opportunity to try and find some quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in a situation where you can't really escape, or like you said with libraries and everything, you had resources to get away and focus. Like if you're in a situation where that's not possible, it's definitely like detrimental to your work,
Yeah, it
and
is.
like, or can be.
Your mental
um
health, even.
yeah, and then even I'd like to go further. Like it's kind of interesting where like the hustle and bustle everyday life kind of can force you to ensure that you have time for quiet. Like if you're busy, recording or gigging or working in any sort of time, like that's something in your day that you have to do. um, and that's already like just a set thing in your schedule that you have to do no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for me personally, like having at least one thing to do in a day forces me, or it kind of opens the door to like add other things. So like blocking off another half hour to read, or just to think or write or practice, or I don't know if you're that way, James. That's kind of like what I've noticed, where because everything bleeds into or every day kind of bleeds into, or sorry, every hour bleeds into every hour kind of during this time. It's harder to set a schedule for yourself, or like to be disciplined.
It is, yeah. It's like I just want to allot an hour to do one specific thing, but it's like it's hard when you're at home because it's like, oh, let's have tea together. Like me and my girlfriend's like, oh, I'll just take 5 minutes to have tea. Okay, let's play cards. Let's play Baracco. It's like, oh, you want to up the ante, and like get into a serious bet. No, we don't gamble, but like, it's like whatever. Like we'll just do things that are common while you're at home that are not common if you weren't at home. Like distractions essentially, and it's really hard to allot an hour aside to just get in the zone and just get in a state of flow and just get something done. Yeah, yeah, it's tough.
So, yeah, we're all struggling with this COVID-19, but along those lines, what other types of struggles did you have to overcome to get to where you are now?
I I got bullied a lot when I was a kid because I was like overweight, and like I mean I'm super tall and skinny now and like exercise a lot and I tell people, that I was like a fat kid. No, people don't believe it, but like yeah, I got bullied a lot like when I was in elementary school, and that was always challenging, but I always had like lots of really close friends at the same time. So um I just know that it did have an impact on me. The way that I view social, relationships and the way I act in relationships myself. I'm very aware of the kind of trauma that exists from having been bullied when I was younger. So that's always been like a challenge for me personally. Um, and also just this feeling, I'm kind of a perfectionist. And as I mentioned earlier, like I feel like I have trouble with attention. Like I get this really like frenetic energy and like I, shake my legs and click my toes and do all these things to kind of expel that energy. But since I'm a perfectionist, I really struggle with knowing when something is finished. And it's always been the problem. And it's been the problem with my last two releases under Project Whatever. I'm releasing two singles, which will be out probably by the time this podcast comes out. One's called Nowhere for Me. The other one's called Promise. And like I recorded them, mixed them, edited them, mastered them, performed on them, like did everything for these tracks, and like I just never know when it's finished, And that's really hard. And that's really hard when you want to produce creative work and you want to just finish it, get it out there, move on to the next thing. So all through my life, I've just like I think it's kind of a blessing and a curse because it's also driven me to do things to a really high degree, to like be the best at something. For instance, like I just want to I have the ability to put the time in because I want to be the best, and like I want to be the best I can be. And when I see my shortcomings so clearly, even though a lot of other people, bystanders, audience, whatever, they don't really notice it because it's a personal thing. But I've always struggled with that, like just how much is enough and when can I take a break, and that's particularly evident now while I'm at home all the time. It's like, how much during the day do I have to work to feel content? And then when I'm content, how do I go about taking a break? How do I go about having a weekend, going to the park and not thinking about stuff that I think I need to do or I want to do? Like, should I go remaster this song for the 15th time? Like, I don't know. It's really hard to know these things. And I know a lot of people struggle with that same thing, with the same idea of perfectionism and not knowing when something is finished, a work is finished. But like, yeah, it's kind of a hindrance for me. I'm struggling with that constantly.
Again, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so just check me out on uh oh, Siri thinks I'm talking to her. Hold on. Whenever I say check me out, she thinks I say hi name
Check
instead
her
of
out.
name. Yeah. Um anyways, yeah, check me out at Project Whatever on Instagram. And on Facebook, check me out at Project Whatever. You can also follow my band Local Talent at Project Local Talent on Instagram, but there's also a link to that in my Project Whatever main profile. Uh, and then you could check out. I have multiple other projects. Like I have a band called Audubon Trio. It's another Toronto band. It's like experimental jazz band, real kind of real trippy stuff, real abstract. You can check that out. If you want a CD or something, you can send me a private message on Instagram. I'll respond to it. I'll ship a CD. I've shipped them all over the world already. It's no problem. We got some merch too. I make a lot of merch by hand. We have a
Yeah, those
website.
T-shirts.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah,
Silkscreen those.
yeah,
Yeah, like me and my girlfriend do a lot of just fun like arts projects and stuff like that. And like you can see that's hers. That's her
Oh, that's
blanket
cool.
she made on the wall.
Yeah.
Um, wish I could give you an apartment tour, but that would be a little. So I'd have to carry an interface, a keyboard, a microphone stand, computer. My tea. That's kind of essential. And just like carrying all this stuff around. But anyways, yeah. So that's how you can get a hold of me. I got. I've by the time you're hearing this, I probably have 2 releases out, 2 singles. That's under Project Whatever. You can check it out on Spotify. You can check out all of my stuff on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Google Plus, Tidal, whatever streaming platforms you use. And you can also buy it on iTunes or buy it on Bandcamp if you want to support me. That money will go to good use. Yeah, that's how you find me. No secrets there.
Well, we really appreciate you being on the show, and we always ask one question, and I'm going to pass that torch on to you. Do you know a guy?
I do. I know one guy. Now, I actually know two people who would be really good for this show. One, his name is Warren Katz. Really interesting guy. He was the tour manager. He is still currently the tour manager for Bad Bad Not Good. Close friend of mine. We've traveled so much together. He also travels with other bands like Tennyson and Ryan Hemsworth, and travels a lot. And he's got so many stories, like specific stories about the music industry, having dealt with many artists across all genres, like different levels of popularity, fame, etc. But on top of that, he's just like a vagabond. Like this guy cannot stop. Like even when he's not working, like for as a tour manager, he's traveling. Like he's got the travel bug. And since the day he got his motorcycle license when he was, 16, I think when he turned 17, he went straight to India and did like a motorcycle tour, solo motorcycle tour, like across India. And he's done tours across like Vietnam, across the entire world. Like he's across South America. He owns like 300 cars and motorcycles. Yeah, like not currently, but has owned over the course of his life. And he just keeps, like, he loves getting new cars and selling them, and then like he knows everything about the automotive industry. And like he's just such an interesting character. He's got stories from all angles. So I think he would be a great person to talk to. He's a close friend of mine. Uh, the other person, is my partner's father. Actually, he's really interesting. He's Brazilian, and so my partner's Brazilian, and we go to Brazil as often as we can. And he's kind of like an entrepreneur, urban planner, and he has this company called Urbain, and it's about bringing like affordable social housing to Sao Paulo. And he just has all these really innovative, he's an innovator, he has all these innovative ideas. He knows so much about what's going on in the world, especially in terms of urban affairs, and he's really interesting to talk to. I think he would make a great guest.
They both sound awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. Okay, sir. Well, thank you for spending your day with us, or a part of the day.
Oh, my pleasure, entirely.
Go back to the mean streets of Toronto.
I actually am going to hit the streets, buy a couple of herbs, I think, for my sister for her birthday, so don't tell her.
Oh, no, absolutely. You got my word. Hey guys and gals, thanks for listening. For more great content, please like, subscribe, and follow I Know This Guy on all social media platforms. I Know This Guy relies on listeners like you. Please visit our Patreon page to find out how you can help.